Good morning, Shindo here. The different factions are lining up together. Even Sweden, the neutral country, is getting more and more interested in becoming a NATO member. This is from Breaking Defense. Fear of Russia drives Sweden closer to NATO. Washington. The Russian threat has driven Sweden so close to NATO that the once neutral nation is becoming an ally in all but name. While the current Swedish government won't apply for NATO membership, a position is just reiterated Friday. Every other kind of collaboration is not only on the table but actually happening more and more. Recent agreements are bringing Sweden into NATO policy councils and war game planning in unprecedented ways. Sweden is building up its forces to keep an ever closer watch on Russia both in the Arctic and the Baltic, a host nation agreement signed just months after Russia's annexation of Crimea makes it easier for NATO to operate in Swedish territory if invited. Sweden has even sent troops into Afghanistan with friends like these who needs formal allies. Quote, "We have a very lively security debate in my country right now," said Björn Lavrov, Sweden's ambassador to the U.S., speaking last week in the ComDef conference here. ComDef sponsors include the Swedish Embassy and Swedish arm maker Saab. The current center-left government opposes NATO membership, but the opposition favors joining the alliance, while public opinion has swung back and forth from poll to poll. The next election isn't scheduled in 2018, however, and said Lavrov, clearly this government, quote, "clearly this government is not going to apply for membership," unquote. "We would not go into collective defensive guarantees," Lavrov said, referring to Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, which requires each NATO member to treat an attack on an ally as an attack on itself. By the strict letter of the treaty, no ally is actually obliged to do anything in particular about it. Short of that commitment, however, he said, Sweden intends to, quote, "move even closer to the alliance." Take the Trident Juncture war games, which made headlines and raised Moscow's ire as NATO flexed long dormant muscle memory of how to mobilize for a major war. Sweden was, quote, "not very much involved at all," unquote, in the 2016 exercise, said Brigadier General Michael Claesson, Deputy Director of Plans and Policy for Sweden's Joint Staff. The only Swedish participants in Trident Juncture 2016 were some naval corvettes and a fighter squadron with an infantry battalion originally slated for the exercise deployed to Mali instead. But the upcoming Trident Juncture of 2018, quote, has a geographical forces on our part of the world, and we also have been invited to take full part of the planning process, Claesson told me after his remarks at the ComDef, quote, "so that will definitely be an activity that opens up more cooperation in the fields of training and exercises," unquote. There's also great potential for less dramatic but equally crucial collaborations in NATO councils and committees. The Enhanced Opportunities Partners program gives Sweden its Nordic neighbor Finland, Jordan, and Australia something close to observer status in NATO deliberations. All 5 countries joined the NATO members at the Warsaw Summit in July, and now the partner nations are thrashing out how they'll engage day-to-day at lower levels. Quote, "For instance, in the Science and Technology Organization of NATO, that will give us all access to all the panels." Enthused John Olof Lind, Director General of Sweden's Defense Research Agency, the FOI, quote, "I would say there is only very, very few cases where we cannot participate. The main exception being we are not within the decision-making body," unquote, Lynn told me at ComDef. where once the default was the non-member like Sweden could not join the discussion, and access to NATO deliberations was won on hard-fought forums at the time. Now the default will be that Sweden can participate in anything unless specifically denied. Quote, the Enhanced Opportunities Program is one of the things that actually makes it possible for us to go into the programs which haven't been open to partners before, unquote, agrees Nicholas Alm, director of the Swedish Security Defense Industry Association. Quote, but where that will end up will need some time to figure out because this is fairly new, unquote. Quote, the major change in that regard is not yet occurred, unquote. Clayson told me frankly, quote, we have been very much preoccupied with crisis management, i.e. near-term response to Russia, so there is still a lot to do, unquote. To flesh out the long-term institutional cooperation envisioned by the Enhanced Opportunities Partner Program, that said, the general emphasized, quote, one should not underestimate, let's call it the structural aspects, because in support of political decision-making, getting access to the right forums and getting the right or relevant information timely is crucial, unquote. American analyst Jeff Rathke agreed. Quote, the operational cooperation in exercises, in overseas deployment, and through the host nation support agreement ratified recently by Swedish Parliament are all significant, unquote. The CSIS scholar told me in an email. Quote, but equally important is the political coordination on critical security issues. The fact that Sweden and Finland were part of the leaders' discussion on Russia at the Warsaw Summit is a new precedent for closer political coordination, unquote. Quote, during the Cold War, there was an old joke about Nordic countries. Norway has NATO to shield it. Sweden has Finland, and Finland has a very, very long border with the Soviet Union, unquote, said Ambassador Eric Edelman, counselor at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments. Quote, even in those days, there were lots of sub-Rosa U.S. Swedish cooperation. Since the Cold War ended, the Finns and Swedes have been involved in lots of close collaboration with NATO, slicing the salami thinner and thinner between membership and non-membership, unquote. Quote, the sort of cooperation would have been inconceivable 15, 25, or 35 years ago, unquote, Rathke said. Quote, it is a function of the shared experience since the end of the Cold War and of the perceived threat from an aggressive and revanchist Russia, unquote. Quote, I cannot look away from the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that there is only one country in the vicinity of my country that moves borders by use of military force, unquote. Clayson grimly told the conference. Particularly troubling for Sweden are increasingly sophisticated weapon systems, so-called anti-access denial A2AD networks based out of Kaliningrad on the Baltic and Murmansk on the Arctic. While Russia's economic and demographic troubles get plenty of press, he said, Moscow's military still manages to modernize, if not grow. Quote, it's the same amount of Russians, but they are better every year. So, looks like the sides are forming for this inevitable war. I think it's going to be stopped, as I've said before, by someone, a statesman who comes in and stops it. But it's going to be a very tentative peace. But it will be stopped for a while. It'll be a build up, build up, build up. We're going to see that in the next few months, not just years, but months. Build up, build up, build up towards the war. Then the next president, whoever that is, the statesman, come in and and bring peace and stability. If you like what I do, please click like, subscribe, comment, and share my videos. This is Shindo. Have a good day.
Who had a mind to decide?